Hello, Silver people, and welcome back to the channel. My name is Trey, and today it is Lore of the Silverhand and the Gryphon, the final illustration of the year, done in inks, or will be done in inks. But this is where we left off, and this is the sketch version of Lore, the Gryphon's egg, and the Gryphon. But how this started, as always, is with a small thumbnail. This is the small thumbnail done on an index card with a pen, a regular ballpoint pen, just to get the idea out. I tried some other ones, but I really liked the whole composition figures of this one, so we worked this up to then a rough sketch. It has some perspective lines, it has the Gryphon's egg, Lore, and the Gryphon, and this is, we're building up. It just doesn't come out fully formed. We have to work up. So from thumbnail to the rough sketch to a sketch. And today we're going to try to get to tight pencils. So from last year, this is the example of a tight pencil sketch that then we brought to inks. It's not super tight. I'm not usually that person because I like it more loose, and then I work on getting the tightness in the inks. I give myself some leeway and room to experiment and improve. But this was what the tight pencil was for last year. And this is last year's final inks, where I tightened everything up with the inks. I did ink washes and some whiteout splatters and gouache white splatters and a lot of detail work. But this is what the final is, what we're working towards for this year's illustration. Now, seeing as we're getting towards the tight pencil phase, I think it's the perfect chance to talk about reference and reference photo gathering. Now, one of the cool parts, but also a very big danger, is that you can, of course, go into a rabbit hole of trying to find reference for just about everything. But in terms of background, I have this America's Spectacular National Parks book that I've had for quite a few years. And so when I'm doing landscapes, I usually try to find some of the most beautiful places in the world, because the natural world is indeed gorgeous. And so from this book and from other sources, I have kind of a library of stuff. But whenever possible, I try to start off with books and finding interesting images, textures, lighting situations, whatever I can think of the natural world. And of course, you can take your own photos, but sometimes it's hard to get to certain places, of course, which you'll have to rely on photos of others. So in this piece, I was looking at the petrified forest as an idea for the general landscape, how flat it is in certain areas, and the grasses that could inhabit this place. Also, there is inspiration from the Grand Canyon, of what do canyons look like, the colors off the rocks, and I like the various striations, how it can be darker down and then fade up to a more chalky color. I always thought that was pretty cool. But I'm looking at anything I can think of to make a better piece. And so I like this canyon. All right, so I'm thinking of the Gryphon lands. What would Gryphon lands be like? And then I saw this, like this rocky spire or rock formations where you could see like a Gryphon perched on top, and Bryce Canyon became my main inspiration for what Gryphon lands would look like. So I can imagine just on its own that there's, a Gryphon perched on each one of these spire type rocky formations. And so I'm trying to bring that, or an idea of that, into the art. So this rock formation is a great inspiration for what I'm thinking of when I think about perched on top would be a Gryphon, and then he would just be observing the land below, getting ready, to leap off and then dive bomb whatever it is he's hunting for prey. And so you take ideas from the natural world and then try to place them into your world, or there's an interplay between your imagination and what is real. So when we talk about reference, we usually start with the internet, the great library of things. So first, when I'm starting an image, and after I do the thumbnail and work it up to, say, about a rough sketch, I start to then note, okay, I'm going to need certain images to make this piece complete. So of course, with the title being Lore and the Gryphon, I'll need Gryphon photos, of course. But a Gryphon is also part lion. So then I have to look at what is the anatomy of lions? How does their hair look? Are there any specific things that I want to think about when making my image of this half bird, half lion thing? Eagles, of course. How do their wings look? What is their wingspan? How do their wings look spanned? Their wingspan looks in certain positions. How do their claws look? What is the beak like? Where are their nostrils? Their eyes are in the front of their head because they're hunter animals, but what is the spacing of that? There's all these little things that can add to a piece that I don't quite think about, and it always helps to have an image or some kind of reference to help guide you along. But of course, it has to be said that a lot of this is an imagination, and I try to use reference as sparingly as possible. Usually I select 3 images, or I try to keep it as few as possible for myself, because I can really go down a rabbit hole with finding reference. So I try to keep it within limits. But here we have some eagle's claws, and how do they look? How do talons look? And of course, in the piece, there's Gryphon's egg sitting before Lore. And so I had to do reference gathering for eggs. What are the spots on them? How do they look? What is their exact shape? But also, one of the most interesting parts about making images and thinking about how do things look in real life is that you'll find links between ideas and concepts that you weren't quite thinking about. So in this world, the Gryphon has 6 eyes, and 6 eyes means it's more powerful. It's like a god form of an animal. And I thought, what if it also has like eyes on its body, or some kind of simulation like a peacock's? How they have this sort of eye-shaped thing on their feathers. But that could be an indication of power. And sometimes when I just let my mind just freely roam, I can see concepts and ideas from one image also bleed into other thoughts and images in my mind that are completely unrelated. So when I was thinking of and looking at the landscape of Bryce Canyon, I then thought of the Basilica Sagrada Familia in Barcelona, which is this beautiful basilica. And I love these spires. And I thought of, it looks almost like what's in Bryce Canyon. And I thought of, what if Gryphons were like on top of each one of these spires? But there's like an interesting dynamic between what your mind can think of and connections that could be made between things that really don't have any connection. But I always like that exploration of different ideas and concepts in making art. But let's get back to the art making process. So here we have where we left off, the rough sketch. And so I'm now in the program called Clip Studio Paint. And I hit P twice to get to the pencil tool. And I usually use a sketch pencil, but now I go for the real pencil to tighten up these lines. And basically I'm just trying to tie down all of this errant loose mess and tie it into a neater package. It doesn't have to be totally clean. I'll leave that for the tight pencil phase when I get to comic book paper. But I'm trying to get something more manageable where I can understand exactly what I'm seeing without all the looseness going on. Now it will get kind of messy, but we're trying to tighten things up at least a little bit. Now my standard practice is, of course, to go for the characters first. So I start with Lore and blocking in his head. And usually once I get the characters down, I feel much better about things. and I work on it in shorter spurts, about an hour, and then before I move on to something else, like working from lore, then to the Gryphon, then working on the egg, and then background. So I try to work around, trying not to stay in one place too long, but just keep it moving, keep it flowing, and try to break this thing down into a more respectful drawing. And every image is different, and every image can have a different focal point, or things you want to stress, or things you want to practice with. It all depends on the artist. And also, since I will be inking this myself, I'm not handing this off to another artist to ink. I can be a little bit looser because I kind of know where I'm going. I don't have to explain to another person what exactly is going on, or what my concept or thoughts are on inking in the future. So I can pretty much do as I wish. And usually off to the side, I have my reference images, either in a photo or even a printout off to the side. And I work on whatever I think needs to be worked on at the moment. And I knew the Gryphon would probably be the most difficult part because it is a mythological creature and it's an amalgamation of different types of animals. And so trying to get that just right in my mind would probably be the biggest challenge. So I try to tackle that early, have the reference images, and I just play between ideas and concepts and erase and change things as I go through it. Like I'm looking at the wings and the talons and the beak structures, eye placement, all of that, trying to get a better idea of what this creature is, how to make it look menacing while slightly believable. It is, not exactly real, but I try to do my best in getting some sort of balance for me that works. All right, and so here, this is what we got so far. This is what I would call something that I could work from for the inks. I did make some adjustments. I think I moved the egg just slightly, or I moved lore just slightly to the left, my left. And I increased the size of the Gryphon. So I have Gryphon copy. I can turn that off and turn this one on. Right. So there's just I wanted more size. So I did more size. Makes it more dramatic in my mind. And so this is what we have so far. And now it's time to bring this to comic book paper with the true tight pencils. This is what I would call tight enough that I could ink from. Since I'm inking it myself, there is no real issues that I can see. Well, I could work around them because I did the drawing and I kind of know where I'm going. So now let's get this down to comic book paper. And so here we have on 11 by 17 comic book paper. This is the full tight pencils and it's ready to be inked. And in the final, we'll throw everything at it. We'll do ink washes, ink wash with staining, you can use a brush, I can use nibs, microns, everything. Everything that I've learned so far will be added. And this is the final illustration of this year. So I have been Trey Hodges. You can find my work at treyhodges.com. Power to all the creators, and I will see you in the finale next week. Take care and keep shining.